Seymour, Indiana, 1982. A small railroad town tucked into the rolling farmland of Jackson County, about 60 miles south of Indianapolis. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where front doors stay unlocked, and where the rhythm of life follows the seasons and the trains that pass through day and night. It is a quiet place, a safe place. Or so people believe. The town sits at the intersection of two major rail lines, earning it the nickname the Crossroads of Southern Indiana. To the north, the land flattens out into river bottoms and dense timber, where the east fork of the White River snakes through miles of marshy lowland before disappearing into the trees. In the fall of 1982, these river bottoms are a world unto themselves. Dark, quiet, and deeply isolated. A place where things can be hidden for a very long time. But beneath the surface of this small town calm, something terrible is about to happen. Something that will haunt this community for more than 4 decades. Something that begins on the night before Halloween. This is the story of Clifford Smith. Clifford Allen Smith is 24 years old. He is a young man trying to build a life for himself in the only place he has ever known. Just 5 months earlier, in May of 1982, Clifford married a woman named Joyce Anderson. With that marriage came not only a wife, but a stepdaughter named Jennifer. For the first time in his life, Clifford has a family of his own, living together at 525 East 3rd Street in Seymour. Life is not perfect. Clifford had been working at the Swifty Oil Company for about a year, but he left that job back in July. He has some minor legal troubles hanging over his head, charges for driving under a suspended license and a muffler violation, with a court date set for December 10th. These are small things, the kind of everyday struggles that most people navigate without much thought. They are certainly not the kind of problems that should lead to a man's death. But Clifford Smith will never see that court date. He will never celebrate his first wedding anniversary. He will never watch his stepdaughter grow up. Because on the night of October 30th, 1982, Clifford Smith walks into a house on East 13th Street in Seymour, and he never walks out. The evening of October 30th is a Saturday night. In Seymour, the air has turned crisp and cold, carrying the smell of dead leaves and wood smoke from chimneys across town. Halloween is tomorrow. Pumpkins sit on porches. Children have their costumes ready. The town is settling into the comfortable routines of an autumn weekend. But not everyone in Seymour is settling in for a quiet night. The details of what happens inside that house have been pieced together over years and decades of investigation. What we know is this. In the late hours of October 30th, Clifford Smith, Ronald Anderson, and several other individuals are gathered at a residence on East 13th Street. It is the night before Halloween, and the darkness outside is thick and heavy. Inside the house, something goes terribly wrong. Whatever the nature of the gathering, whatever brought these people together under one roof on this particular night, the events that unfold will destroy one life and forever alter several others. Ronald Anderson, who is roughly the same age as Clifford, retrieves a shotgun from somewhere inside the house. He loads it. The weight of the shells sliding into the chamber. The click of the action snapping shut. These are sounds that will echo through the next 41 years. Anderson then leaves the house, but he does not leave alone. Clifford Smith goes with him, and so does the loaded shotgun. The two men get into a vehicle and drive off into the Halloween darkness. No one else in that house will ever see Clifford Smith alive again. What happens next takes place somewhere in the rural darkness north of Seymour, near the White River, in an area close to the small settlement of Rockford. It is a desolate stretch of land, the kind of place where the river curves through dense bottomland forest, where the water moves slow and dark, and where the sounds of the night swallow everything. There, in that lonely darkness, Ronald Anderson raises the shotgun and fires. The blast strikes Clifford Smith in the head. A 24-year-old man, a husband, a stepfather, gone in an instant, erased from the world by a single trigger pull. But Anderson is not finished. He drives back to the house on East 13th Street and returns the shotgun, placing it back where he found it. Then he goes back. He returns to the place where Clifford's body lies in the cold October night, and he attempts to conceal the evidence. He hides what he has done, or tries to, trusting that the darkness and the river and the passage of time will keep his secret. And for a while they do. In the days that follow, life in Seymour continues as if nothing has happened. Halloween comes and goes. Children trick or treat through the neighborhoods. The clocks fall back as daylight saving time ends. The autumn deepens into something colder, grayer. And in that house on East 13th Street, the people who were present on the night of October 30th go about their lives, carrying whatever they know, whatever they saw, whatever they suspect, in silence. 4 days pass. November 4th, 1982, Joyce Smith, Clifford's wife of barely 5 months, walks into the local police station and files a missing persons report. Her husband has not come home for several days. She does not know where he is. She does not know what happened to him or why he left. The worry in her voice is the worry of a young wife who has only been married since May, who has a daughter at home, and who cannot understand why the man she married would simply vanish without a word. She does not know that he is already dead, his body lying in the cold waters of the White River Bayou, slowly being claimed by the elements. The days turn into weeks. November passes. Thanksgiving comes and goes. Joyce waits. The police search. But Seymour is a small town, and the surrounding countryside is vast. The White River winds through miles of wooded bottomland, and the bayous and backwaters create a labyrinth of hidden places where something, or someone, could remain undiscovered for a very long time. The water is cold and dark, the banks overgrown with brush and timber. In 1982, there are no cell phones to track, no surveillance cameras to review, no digital footprints to follow. A missing person in rural Indiana can stay missing. December 1st, 1982. 1 month after Clifford vanished, 2 teenage boys, Scott Bridgewater and Randy Marshall, are out in the rural area near the White River, checking their animal traps. It is the kind of activity that boys in rural Indiana have done for generations, walking the riverbanks in the cold winter air, checking lines and traps in the early morning light. But on this morning, they find something that will change everything. There, in the bayou near the White River, floating on his back in the dark water, is the body of a man. He is wearing jeans, brown boots, and a black t-shirt. His body is badly decomposed from weeks of exposure to the water and the elements, but in his pockets, they find an identification card. The name on it reads Clifford A. Smith. The boys alert authorities, and the Indiana State Police are called to the scene. The investigation into Clifford Smith's death begins in earnest. The medical examiner determines the cause of death, a gunshot wound to the head. This is no accident. This is no suicide. Clifford Smith has been murdered. Indiana State Police detectives begin canvassing the area. They interview people who knew Clifford. They interview people who were at the house on East 13th Street on the night of October 30th. They interview Ronald Anderson, but in 1982, the evidence they can gather is not enough. The murder weapon is never recovered. Physical evidence from the scene has been washed away by the river or hidden too well. Witnesses are reluctant to talk, or perhaps they do not know enough to point investigators in the right direction. The case goes cold. This is the cruelest phase of any unsolved murder. The initial urgency fades. The detectives who work the case move on to other assignments, other crimes, other demands on their time. The file is placed in a cabinet, the evidence is boxed and stored, and the family is left alone with their grief and their unanswered questions. For Joyce Smith, the torment is almost unimaginable. She has lost her husband of 5 months. She married Clifford in May, full of hope for their future together, and by December she is identifying his decomposed body. Jennifer has lost her stepfather, and they have no answers, no arrest, no trial, no justice. Just the knowledge that somewhere out there, the person who killed Clifford Smith is walking free, living their life as though nothing happened. And Ronald Anderson does exactly that. He remains in Seymour. He lives his life in the very same town where he took another man's life. He walks the same streets, shops at the same stores, passes the same landmarks, exists in the same community as the family of the man he killed. Every day for years, for decades. He watches the seasons change and the town evolve, secure in the belief that whatever happened on that Halloween night will stay buried. Consider what that means. Consider the weight of carrying a secret like that for 41 years. Every time a police car passes, every time someone mentions the name Clifford Smith, every time Halloween comes around again and the calendar turns to October 31st. For 41 years, Ronald Anderson lives with what he did, and for 41 years, he gets away with it. The case file sits in a drawer at the Indiana State Police Versailles Post. It is not forgotten, not entirely. Over the years, it has passed from one investigator to another, each one reviewing the evidence, each one hoping to find the thread that will unravel the mystery. But the years pile up. 1983, 1990, 2000, 2010. The witnesses age. Memories fade. The Berlin Wall falls. The internet is born. The entire world transforms. And still, the murder of Clifford Smith remains unsolved. But justice has a long memory. In September of 2015, more than 33 years after Clifford Smith's murder, a sergeant named Kip Main at the Indiana State Police Versailles post picks up the cold case file. Sergeant Main is not content to simply review the case and set it aside. He digs in. He goes back to the beginning, reviewing every interview, every piece of evidence, every lead that was followed, and every lead that was not. What Sergeant Main finds in those old files tells a story that has been waiting decades to be told. The interviews conducted in 1982, when viewed through the lens of modern investigative techniques and fresh eyes, reveal details that earlier investigators may have missed or could not fully appreciate at the time. The pieces begin to come together. Main's investigation zeroes in on Ronald Anderson. The evidence builds. Anderson was at the house on East 13th Street with Clifford Smith. Anderson retrieved the shotgun and loaded it. Anderson left in a vehicle with Smith. Anderson returned the gun to the house afterward. Anderson went back to the crime scene to hide evidence. Each fact is a link in a chain, and Sergeant Main methodically connects them all. But building a case that can stand up in court after more than 4 decades is no simple task. Memories from 1982 must be tested against the passage of time. Witnesses who were interviewed decades ago must be found and re-interviewed. Some may have moved away. Some may have died. Some may be more willing to talk now than they were, then unburdened by the years or by a guilty conscience that has grown too heavy to carry. Evidence must be verified against modern legal standards. Every claim must be supported. Every timeline must hold. Sergeant Main works the case for years, painstakingly assembling the puzzle pieces that time has scattered. This is not glamorous work. There are no dramatic breakthroughs in a laboratory, no sudden confessions caught on camera. It is the grinding, methodical labor of a detective who believes that the truth is in the details, and who is willing to spend years sifting through those details until the picture becomes clear. 8 years after reopening the investigation, the moment finally arrives. October 31st, 2023. Halloween. Exactly 41 years to the day since Clifford Smith was murdered. On this date, with a kind of poetic symmetry that no fiction writer would dare invent, an arrest warrant is executed. Ronald J. Anderson, now 61 years old, is taken into custody at his home in Seymour, Indiana. He is arrested without incident and transported to the Jackson County Jail. The charge is murder. For 41 years, Anderson has lived as a free man. For 41 years, the secret of what happened on that Halloween night in 1982 has remained buried, like the body he tried to hide in the river. But now, at last, the truth has surfaced. The news of the arrest sends shockwaves through Seymour. A 41-year-old cold case solved on the exact anniversary of the crime. People who had long forgotten about Clifford Smith are reminded of the young man whose life was cut short. People who never forgot are finally given a reason to hope that justice, however delayed, might still be served. Indiana State Police Sergeant Stephen Wheels confirms the arrest to the public, and the details of the investigation begin to emerge. The community learns what investigators have known. That Clifford Smith was killed by someone he knew, someone he trusted enough to get into a vehicle with on a dark October night. That his killer then went to extraordinary lengths to cover up what he had done, returning the weapon and going back to the scene to conceal evidence. And that the killer then lived among them in their town for over 4 decades. The legal process moves forward. Anderson is held in the Jackson County Jail, and the case proceeds through the Jackson Circuit Court. Prosecutors evaluate the evidence that Sergeant Main has assembled over nearly a decade of investigation. On April 4th, 2025, Ronald Anderson appears before the court and enters a plea. He pleads guilty to voluntary manslaughter, a charge that specifies murder committed under sudden provocation. As part of the plea agreement, the original murder charge is dismissed. The plea to voluntary manslaughter raises as many questions as it answers. The charge specifies that the killing was committed under sudden provocation. But what was the nature of that provocation? What could have happened between 2 men in a vehicle on a dark October night that would lead one of them to raise a shotgun and pull the trigger? Was it an argument that spiraled out of control? The A confrontation that turned deadly in an instant. These are questions that the plea agreement does not answer, and they may remain unanswered forever. Whatever words were exchanged, whatever conflict arose, it ended with a shotgun blast that took a young man's life and cast a shadow over an entire community for more than 40 years. And whatever provocation Anderson claims, it does not explain the actions he took afterward, returning the weapon, going back to the scene to conceal evidence, allowing Clifford's wife to file a missing persons report while he knew exactly where Clifford was. These are not the actions of a man who killed in a moment of passion. These are the actions of a man who chose to hide what he had done. On May 12th, 2025, Judge Richard Pointer hands down the sentence. Ronald J. Anderson, now 63 years old, is sentenced to 18 years in prison for the voluntary manslaughter of Clifford Smith. 18 years. For some, it may seem like too little for a life taken and then covered up for 4 decades. For others, it represents a measure of closure that once seemed impossible. Deputy prosecutors Mark Hollingsworth and Daniel Carnes expressed their satisfaction with the outcome and commend the Indiana State Police for their unwavering dedication to solving the case. But for Joy Smith, for Jennifer, for everyone who loved Clifford, the sentence cannot undo what was done. It cannot give back the years that were stolen. It cannot fill the empty chair at the table, or answer the questions that a stepdaughter must have carried her entire life. What it can do is this: it can say, finally and definitively, that Clifford Smith mattered, that his life had value, that his death was not forgotten, that even when the trail went cold, even when decades passed and the world moved on, there were people who refused to let his story end with a body floating in a river. There is something worth reflecting on in the story of Sergeant Kip Maine. Here's a man who in 2015 chose to pick up a case file that was already 33 years old, a case that other investigators had reviewed and set aside, a case that, by any reasonable measure, most people would have considered unsolvable. But Maine did not see it that way. He saw a victim who deserved answers and a family that deserved closure. He spent 8 years of his career pursuing justice for a man he never met, a man who died before Maine likely ever wore a badge. That kind of dedication speaks to something deeper than professional obligation. It speaks to a belief that every victim deserves an answer, no matter how long it takes to find one. It speaks to a refusal to accept that the passage of time can erase accountability. And in the end, it is that refusal, that stubbornness, that quiet determination that brings this story to its conclusion. Seymour, Indiana is still a small town. The trains still pass through. The White River still winds through the bottomland north of town, past Rockford, through the places where Clifford Smith's body once lay hidden. The house on East 13th Street still stands, but now the secret that house held for 41 years has finally been spoken aloud. The darkness of that Halloween night in 1982 has finally been pierced by the light of truth. And Clifford Allen Smith, the 24-year-old husband and stepfather who walked into that house and never walked out, has finally received the only thing the living can give to the dead: justice. If you found this story worth telling, please consider subscribing to For Idle Ears. Every case we cover is a real person whose story deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening.